Hey, welcome back to the Think Bigger Real Estate Show. I'm your host, Justin Stoddart. Are real estate teams good for real estate or not? Today's episode is going to be all about that. I have with me today somebody who is a proponent of teams doing some amazing things. His name's Christopher Waters. He's been on the show before. Excited to have him back. Christopher, thanks for being here. I'm excited to delve into this topic with you.
Yeah, me too, Justin. Excited to be on your show again.
Yeah, thank you for coming back. For those that don't know Christopher, his background, he's in 8 locations across the U.S. and Canada. His hub, his main business is based out of Austin, Texas. He's got a real estate brokerage there. He's author of $1 Million Real Estate Team. So he has not only written about it, but he's done it, right? Which is impressive. And for those of you who are maybe tuning in to the show for the first time or haven't been listening for a while, I want to restate the purpose of this entire show, right? Is that when you are around big thinkers, guess what? You become one. Your thoughts expand, your actions follow suit, and pretty soon your impact also follows suit. And my passion is to help people realize the divine potential within them and to begin to live up to their potential, impacting the world in great ways. So I'm excited to have Christopher on here today because whether or not you agree with his view on teams, the fact is the guy's a big thinker and he's going to influence you to make a bigger impact in your world. So again, thank you again for being here, Christopher. Let's delve into a topic you and I started down and we said, shoot, this is good content. Let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and hit broadcast here.
Yeah. So, I mean, something I was telling you earlier was when I got started building a real estate team full-time in 2010, and I went and went through every coaching program imaginable. Like I've paid all the coaches, I've been through all the different coaching programs, and they were all amazing. Like I learned so much going through all these coaching programs. I always say like one of the secrets or one of the shortcuts to like growing super fast is not trying to reinvent the wheel and go learn from somebody that's already done it. I was watching Shark Tank back in 2010, and Damon John on Shark Tank said, "Pioneers get slaughtered and settlers prosper." And I was really frustrated with my growth. Like I wasn't, selling as many homes as I wanted. And I heard him say that on Shark Tank, and I'm like, man, why am I trying to be all innovative and all this stuff? Like I don't have hundreds of millions of dollars like, these big tech companies, right? Like I'm bootstrapping and putting money on a credit card and just trying to, scrounge up enough money to pay for lead gen and all that kind of stuff. And so I was like, there's obviously lots of people that have come before me, super successful. So anyways, I got involved in coaching and like it really radically changed my world because I had learned from people that had already figured it out. And in 2013, I kind of hit a brick wall. Between January and June of 2013, I went on 267 listing appointments. My title rep loved me, by the way. So I hit this brick wall. I was literally drinking so much Red Bull and like Monster Energy and going from 6 a.m. till 2 o'clock in the morning. And when I first got started in real estate, I wanted all the fancy cars and the fancy house and all that stuff. But the real reason I really wanted to make a lot of money was, I remember as a little kid always feeling like I needed to prove myself because, I had a lot of like academically driven people in my family. And but none of them were entrepreneurs. Like they were all like successful in their own right. Never made a ton of money, though, but very, very academically driven. And my mom was a nurse, so I didn't have a lot of money growing up. And so ever since I was a little kid, I always felt like I had something to prove. And so I had this big goal that by the time I hit 30, I wanted $1 million. But it wasn't really about the money. It was just trying to, gain the respect of my family and the people around me. And so I made that happen in 2013. But I did it at the expense of realizing that what I was chasing, the North Star I was chasing of like making all this money, going on tons of appointments, which is like what everybody thinks they should be doing, right? Like I got there to the nth degree. And I was like, man, this is not what I thought it was. Like, have you ever had that happen where like the North Star didn't end up being the North Star?
I have, absolutely. I mean, I think all the way back to high school, this was probably the first example. My wife actually hates it. So if she's watching this, she's going to probably chime in. She hates it when I share this story. But from a very early age, I realized that outside things couldn't make me happy. I had poured my entire heart and soul into football. We were state champions, 2 of my 3 years at that particular high school. And I remember as a junior holding the championship trophy over my head. And I'm like, I'm still not happy. Like, why is this not more exciting to me right now? And I had the whole town there, right, cheering me on. Yeah. And although, I've had a number of experiences since then that have kind of reinforced that lesson. That was the earliest that I remember of like trophies don't make you happy, right? They don't fix what needs to be fixed inside, right? And I think that really is everything from relationships, from spirituality. There's some things that really do fix the inside. That then once that foundation is in place, then you can go create some great things and impact a lot of people. But it's got to start at the foundation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man, I couldn't agree more. So the thing was, is like I realized in the summer of 2013, I was on that transaction treadmill, and I got the trophy, and it wasn't fulfilling. And I was like, man, there's got to be more, right? And so number one, like I didn't have a lot of time. Just like I couldn't, even with the money I had made, I couldn't spend it because I'm working 7 days a week. And it wasn't, I remember reading a book by Robert Kiyosaki called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And there was this quadrant, and he said, top left is an employee, bottom left is the self-employed, and the top right's a business owner, and in the bottom right quadrant was an investor. Yeah. And he said the difference between an employee and somebody self-employed versus being on the right side is if you're a business owner or an investor, you don't trade time for money. And so after going through all these coaching programs, something I realized was, and they're all amazing. Like I highly recommend all of them. But the thing that I realized is there's very few people that actually help you go from owning a job, being self-employed, to actually owning a business. And very few people actually make that transition and legitimately have like a business that could operate without them. And so I spent the next 2 years trying to, figure that out. And I remember in 2015, looking at my tax return, and I had broke a net income. Like I literally paid taxes on $1 million. And I felt like I had found the gold underneath the rainbow bridge. You know what I mean? Like it was like one of these things where I was like, I felt like I had this moral obligation to like share with the world how I did this, because I didn't work with a single client from June of 2013 to 2015. And was able to make even more money in a single year than I had made in my first 3 years. And so anyways, that's a little bit about my story. But I wrote a book about my journey, and I'll give this to people for free. I honestly, the reason I wrote this is I was going to all these masterminds, and I was like quietly sharing with people some of the things that I did. Like I kind of just did it by accident and fell ass backwards into doing some things that kind of really helped me, propel the growth curve. And I didn't want to tell anybody about it because I was afraid if they started doing these things too and it didn't work, they'd be pissed off or something. But I kind of quietly started sharing some of the stuff I was doing back in like 2014 and 2015 with some of the people I was in these mastermind groups with. And these guys, that I was sitting right next to, like they were growing, like they'd been in business a long time, 10, 15, 20 years. And they were growing, 20, 30, 40% a year. But I was growing like 300%. And so like I started telling them what I was doing, and all of a sudden like their businesses took off too. So the word started spreading, and I started getting hammered on Facebook about how we, did what we did. And, my wife and I had we had a baby. This was 3 years ago. And like, my wife's like trying to get my help, and I'm there like trying to answer people's questions on my phone all day on Facebook and stuff. And I was like, man, I should just document this in a book. So I spent a year writing the book, and, yeah, I'm happy to give this to any of your listeners. You guys can get a copy of it for free. I just ask you pay shipping and handling.
Yeah.
So
I love it. So what I hear you saying, Christopher, is that the coaching programs that are out there in place, at least the ones that you went through, were very centered on helping you be a very high performing, self-employed individual.
Yeah.
And they also simultaneously tend to create a problem, right? Because the more productive you are in that world, the more you're trading time for money, right? The more that you, with more productivity comes more time commitment. And it isn't until you make that pivot to actually become a business owner, right? You can become very productive at work, but you and I both know at the end of the day that there are some things that are lacking in life. I'm actually reading a book. I have it right here. Hold on just a sec. It's by mentor of mine by the name of Clayton M. Christensen. How will you measure your life? Oh my goodness.
Read it, man. Great.
Have you?
Yeah, read it. Yeah.
So for those that haven't read it, it goes into, he was a Harvard grad, now a Harvard professor. At his 10-year reunion, he was just so excited to come back and see the amazing accomplishments of his classmates. And he found out that many didn't have good personal relationships, lots of divorces. In fact, a couple of them were in jail. One was the CEO of Enron. Like some guys got down a really bad path. And he said these individuals that were now incarcerated weren't the people that he remembered. Like they were actually really good human beings. But for some reason, they got a little bit off track and they got chasing these big trophies with peer pressure or whatever that was, and ended up, really kind of dive bombing life. And so the book, I'm not that deep into it yet, but one of the things that I hear kind of as an early theme is how important your moral compass is and how important your personal relationships are. And I'm not saying that these coaching programs would encourage that, but I do think that there tends to be, as you mentioned, the treadmill, like the transaction treadmill of like always trying to get ahead and win the trophy. That if it's always you doing it, some things are going to take a hit, right? Maybe that moral compass, maybe those personal relationships. And at the end of the day, again, as Clayton Christensen asked, how will you measure your life? Are the trophies really going to matter? Or is it the relationships, the people that are there, right, to mourn your loss? Are they the people that you love the most?
So it's interesting you mentioned that book. So something that had changed for me back in 2013 was I'd gone through all these coaching programs and I was kind of, and they all helped me grow, incrementally have lots of growth. But I was like, man, I need to find somebody else outside of the industry because I've tapped on all the shoulders in the real estate industry. And so I got introduced to a leadership coach, and it's so funny you just showed me that book because it's one of the first books he recommended to me. So that author, Clayton Christensen, he's written several books on leadership. Yeah. But the key thing, like I learned getting into leadership coaching, is like if you're going to create leverage for yourself and have this self-sustaining organization, you need to create something bigger than yourself. And so, when you can create an organization that kind of has like this sense of shared purpose around all the team members, like that is when people like get bought into something and are willing to show up to work to like do something bigger than you, the owner, or even them, the agents, for example. There's I don't know if anybody remembers the encyclopedia industry, right? But like encyclopedia industry got wiped out by Wikipedia, and people submit content on Wikipedia for free. And it's because they feel like they can level up mankind by, pushing out really great content for people to read and just improve their being. And so one of the key ingredients I learned going through leadership coaching, and which was kind of interesting because I remember in business school learning that you need to have a mission, a vision, and core values. But like at that point in my life, I was like 28, 29, 30. And those things I thought were just check boxes, right? Like I had a mission, vision, core values, and like I probably just stole them from some other people and took, and like a collage of things that sounded good. But the thing I started learning about like leadership, for example, is like if you want to make that transition from owning a job basically to being a business owner, like you got to start thinking a lot bigger than yourself and think about how you can get people to buy into something, that makes them want to jump out of bed. And that is where the foundational DNA of your business comes into play. And what I mean by that is your vision, your mission, and your core values. Because obviously, if you're going to build a business, you need to align with people that have similar values as yourself. Like if you're fiercely committed or resourceful type of person, et cetera. And then you got to figure out what's your purpose in business. Like, and your purpose in business needs to not only affect the agents you hire, but it needs to also have an impact on your customers and your community. And so if you can get those three things in alignment to have an impact on all three of those people, that will get people to buy into something even bigger than you, the owner. Because if you try starting a team or a business and people think like this is just about making you rich as a business owner, like people aren't going to buy into that. And so, I think, man, you hear so many people talk about, once they have tons of money. I was reading this cool thing Steve Jobs wrote right before he died, and he said, he died with like $7 billion, and he's sitting on his deathbed, saying, he wished parents and and educators would teach people to focus on happiness and having a positive impact on the world versus like trying to go out and make a bunch of money. And so there's like this huge mindset shift you have to go through to transition from being a self-employed agent or being like, one of these team leaders that's also a rainmaker into a business owner. Cause like you gotta stop thinking about the money and you gotta start thinking about how can you have an impact on the people you surround yourself with. Again, agents, customers, community. And like, it's hard for people to like quantify the value. Like, most high driving personalities want to attach like an economic, dollar amount to like whatever it is they're doing. And so it's hard to like think about the economic impact personally from a cash perspective on, creating an organization that its purpose is built on helping customers, agents, and community. Like it's just one of those hard things to quantify. Like you don't see like how there's going to be a direct impact by focusing on that. And something I think I realized between 2013 and 2015 was, when you first get into real estate, you think about how long the conversion cycle is from being like, a new agent and like, trying to find clients, which takes months, and then getting a deal under contract, and then actually closing. It's months and months. And like in your mind, maybe previously you were at a job getting a paycheck every 2 weeks or whatever, but like the conversion cycle is really long. And what's even longer is the conversion cycle of going from, being a self-employed agent to a business owner, because as a business owner, you have to start like integrating into your language with your team, why you guys are in business, the positive impact you're trying to have on all these people. And, you're making decisions around hiring people and creating leverage for yourself by hiring people with similar values. And all of those like tactical day-to-day things you're doing, like you don't reap the benefits of that for like, 1 to 2 years. But when you do, it's just like, it's like leapfrog, exponential growth. It just sucks. But it literally, these are some of the components that help you transition to being a legit business owner, not just somebody that owns a job.
It's interesting that you say this. Donald Miller, who is the author of Story Brand, love that guy. He shared, he said, his situation has been changed pretty rapidly as a result of the writing of that book. And he said, as I've been around wealthy people, he said, it's really quite simple, is that people that get wealthy have businesses and investments that are working when they're not. And, what I hear you saying is that the way wealth is built is obviously to have people doing that. Yet if the purpose for you bringing them on is to do that, it actually doesn't work. Right? Yeah, you actually have to not bring them on for that purpose. You have to actually bring them on to empower them, to enrich their lives, and to be able to affect more lives through the good work that you do, which keeps them, like you said, bought into a bigger cause, bought into not just your big life plan, but their big life plan, right? If they're just a pawn in your game, at some point they're going to want to go play their own game if they're talented at all. But if you can say, look, this is a platform through which you can build, your great life. This isn't mine. This is ours. This is the stage that simply I've sacrificed to build so that others can build their great lives on top of it. Now all of a sudden you have a recipe to actually attract a quality team, keep a quality team, and get that true leverage, which actually does in turn then create wealth.
Couldn't agree more, man. And it's hard because like I know when you're building, like you're just thinking about that next commission check. But if you're ever going to get out of that, off that whirlwind or get off that treadmill, it's like your belief, like you were saying at the very intro of this podcast, like your mindset, your beliefs, like those drive your emotions, which drive your activities, and your activities drive your results. And so I think the first thing is you got to just believe that, like, if you want to make that transition from being an agent to like a legitimate business owner, and like, look, there's a lot of people in real estate, especially people that have teams, like they don't have a business, they own a job. Like they're, maybe their team is crushing it, but like they have to show up every single day. And if I really spend enough time with them, I'm willing to bet they're wearing a lot of different hats. So you have to get, you have to get your team to be pretty large from a transaction count and a commission perspective. And to get that many number of people bought in, it's going to have to be about more than just you trying to get rich. So I'd recommend if there's, for those people watching this, definitely go check out Clayton Christensen. He also wrote another great book called The Road to Character. And what's crazy, man, we're going on a tangent here about leadership, but like the thing is like all these books about leadership, like it just sounds like, philosophical, theory and all this stuff. And like, I remember like in the early days, like it was so hard to quantify, like, okay, if I follow the advice of Simon Sinek, Clayton Christensen, all these, there's another great one out I'd recommend, Justin, called Culture Code. That one was amazing, by the way.
Who wrote that? I've had that recommended before, and I can't.
So it was written by Daniel Coyle.
Okay.
And what he says in the beginning of the book is that, so this guy like studied every organization imaginable, like went into like all these elite organizations and was trying to figure out like what made like high performing groups high performing. And something after like decades of studying this, he discovered was that it had nothing to do with people's backgrounds, their skills, none of that. It had to do with how did each person feel amongst their peers. And so in sales, I think everybody on here would agree that your mindset drives your results. Like 80% of sales success is driven by mindset.
Yeah.
And so like, when you're trying to build an organization, like one of the first dominoes you got to knock down is like helping improve your sales team's mindset. And so that's actually where core values come into play. So like, again, in college, I thought core values was just a checkbox, but what I realized is if you can actually find people with similar core values, that shows up in their daily actions as people. So like, for example, if one of our core values is being fiercely committed, and we've all probably met people that are like the type of people that will just wrestle a problem to the ground and like will just not quit, like they just have that grit that won't quit. And so like imagine, a room full of people like that, they're gonna like their performance is gonna be through the roof. Now imagine if you like threw somebody in there that didn't have that same value, like it could create some corruption, and it's like a weed growing in a garden, And so your job as a leader is to help like with these behavioral things, like improving people's, their mindset when they come into work. And so that's like a huge shift from being a real estate agent, because as a real estate agent, you're thinking about how to get deals closed. And as a leader, you're trying to help people level up and just be better human beings. And a lot of that starts with just surrounding people with like-minded people that have similar core values. So anyways, I could talk about this. I could talk about this all day.
I mean, I think, an interesting component, guy that I work with here at Old Republic, Steve Yeager, just a great leader. He said, the highest form of sales is leadership, and I think to your point that we oftentimes spend a lot of time kind of focusing on the tactical scripts and what to say and what not to say, which I think is important, but also at the core, every one of us that are in sales and even in management leadership type roles, leadership is foundational to all of that. Like we have to be able to lead people through a transaction, like you said, to get a deal closed, right? People have to be able to confide in us that we are the professional that they want to use. So, I think these leadership books that we've been discussing and the people focusing on that is only going to help both their team business as well as their own transactional business. Being a leader is in greater need now than I think it's ever been. That's pretty evident in the world today. And the more that you can become a better leader, the more opportunity, the more people are going to want to follow you, whether it be in their transactions, right, or even as their team leader.
Yeah, I think, man, that's a great point. I think agents are leaders. They, are trying to lead people to the right, home that's best for their family. And that's very much, servant leadership, trying to put somebody else's interest before your own. Yeah. And so we learn how to do that as agents, like there's all this stuff we learn how to do to pull that off. And so again, that transition from being self-employed to being a business owner, you guys start thinking, well, what are the scripts? What are the tactical things? What are my daily activities to, be a great leader to people that are not trying to buy a house, but are trying to have success in their own life?
Yeah, I love it. Let's kind of on how people can get in contact with you. You've created a course around this book, is what I understand, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm, yeah. So I'm not really in the coaching industry, but I do like to help people, make that transition, because I do feel like there's a hole. Like there's not a lot of people helping agents and people with these small teams like learn how to level up and make that transition from being self-employed and owning a job to having a business that doesn't actually need them.
Yeah.
And so I didn't want to start some big coaching program. But I did want to, I do feel a more obligation to like share this with the world. And so I created a course called CEO Masterclass, and it's predicated specifically on helping real estate agents make the transition from being a salesperson to actually being a CEO and a business owner. And we talk about all of the different components of making that transition around, scaling, recruiting, and we talk about the selection process, and we talk about the vetting process. Some of the tactics and strategies we use around recruiting and selection, we modeled after, studying Harvard, the Navy SEALs, like what they do to vet people out, studying Teachers for America, a nonprofit organization, ranked number 4 by Forbes magazine as one of the hardest companies to get a job for. It's a nonprofit, by the way, and you don't get paid a lot of money. But anyways, we modeled a lot of these other successful companies and organizations to implement a funnel, if you will, from a recruiting and selection perspective around finding talent. So that's one of the things we talk about. We also talk about just the art of building culture. So something I had to learn the hard way was the difference between the art of leadership and the science of leadership. And so every single person like has a natural tendency towards one or the other. So for example, the art of leadership is really like being, cued in to how a team member makes somebody else feel. Like people that are really good at the art of leadership, like, they do a great job creating like a high energy environment. And like when they see someone that's like a negative Nancy, like they kick them out of the organization really fast. So they make it feel like that family type of environment. And then the science of leadership is understanding all the KPIs. So like to be able to coach an agent, you need to understand like, standards around conversion metrics, like from, number of calls made to number of contacts to appointments set, et cetera. And so we all come from either, our natural tendency is going to be one or the other. And so we talk about those two things and the things you can do tactically, to improve on, maybe perhaps it's your weakness if it's one or the other. And then we also talk about lead generation. There's one of the things that I realized starting my real estate team, especially being a millennial, I was all about internet lead generation, buying leads on Facebook, Google. And when I first got started and I started giving these leads to my agents, I realized I was setting my agents up for success. Setting my agents up for failure. When I gave agents only internet leads from Facebook and Google, like I was literally setting them up to fail because those lead sources had a very low conversion rate and they had a really long conversion cycle. And so something I realized over time was like my job as a team leader was to set agents up for success. And to do that, I needed to help them be efficient with their time and work higher quality leads that would convert faster, especially because, they can't go 6 months without a paycheck. So I started identifying the lead sources that converted at substantially higher conversion rates, up to 30% or higher. Like literally 1 out of every 3 leads closes, which is like, with compared to internet leads, 1 out of 100 closes. So 1 out of 3 is pretty amazing. Yeah. So anyway, started identifying all the lead sources that convert north of 30% and, will close in less than 90 days. So we talk about that, how you got to make sure you set your agents up for success on the lead gen side. And then we also go into the technology a little bit around like accountability tools. As a leader, you need transparency into what your agents are doing so you can actually coach them to understand where the holes are. So anyways, that's kind of,
great stuff, man. How do people get their hands on your book? Is there a link you can send us, or I can put it in the show notes if you don't have it on you?
Yeah. So let's see. Let me see if I have a link here.
While you're looking for that, we'll go ahead and prepare to kind of have you answer the signature question. The important thing I think for people to realize is that anytime you can consume the content of people that not only talk a big game, but that do a big game, right? How many transactions did your collective teams close over the past year, Chris, across 8 locations? Roughly. I don't even know.
I should know this. Our hub closed just shy of 600 transactions and just shy of about 200 million.
Okay.
All of our teams are pretty new. Like they're all less than 2 years old. I guess just to give you some like trajectory history from the first couple teams, like most of the people I work with, they start off like they're agents, right, doing 30, 40 deals in the first year. I've consistently gotten all of them to triple and go to 100 in the first year.
Wow.
In their second year, they've all gone from 100 to 250. So I think if I had to guess, like as a group, we're going to be, somewhere around 2,500 to 3,000 transactions this year. And then we'll probably double that next year. We'll probably go to 5,000 transactions next year. So,
impressive, man. Impressive stuff. I want to highlight Chris Mers, who's a big fan of yours. I'm a big fan of Chris's. He's a great guy, great local agent here where I'm at. But he had some nice things to say about you. This is amazing. Chris Waters is a genius. I'd have to agree. Very smart guy we have here on the episode of this today. So with that, Chris, first and foremost, thanks for chiming in. Chris, let me ask the signature question of the show, which is, you're obviously a big thinker. Hence, you're on the Think Bigger Real Estate Show. What does a guy like you continue to do to continue to expand your own possibilities, to continue to be a big thinker? Teach us what you do.
I think everybody's heard that saying, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most amount of time with. And so something I think if you're a high driver personality, always trying to take things to the next level, it's kind of interesting. That's a great question, because I have found myself in many times in life where I found myself like catching up to the 5 people I surrounded myself with, and then kind of looking around like, okay, what now? And so that's a really great question. And so what's kind of interesting is I'm totally connecting and getting to know and like masterminding now with people that are like at a much higher level. I'm actually I'm have the opportunity to spend some time with Lee Walker next week, which probably most people watching this podcast have no idea who Lee Walker is. Lee Walker in the mid 1980s, he was hired by Michael Dell. Dell Computers in the early 80s was on the brink of bankruptcy, and Lee Walker was a physicist, and he got his MBA from Harvard, and just this like super brilliant guy. And he actually turned Michael Dell down the first time Michael tried to recruit him. And Michael was 21 years old at the time, and Lee Walker was in his mid 40s and already done like some pretty cool stuff. And so Lee Walker was the first president of Dell Computers, and what is probably one of the key reasons why Dell Computers became what it became. And so I get to spend some time with Lee Walker next Monday. I'm actually in preparation of our meeting. Lee Walker, by the way, is in his 70s now, so like I don't. It's super awesome. Like it was, like getting connected to people like that's super hard. These people are like super wealthy. Like time is a very sacred resource, but I find myself spending a lot of time trying to connect with people like that. That's something that resonates with me all the time is that saying from I heard on Shark Tank, pioneers get slaughtered and settlers prosper. And you always hear the saying like, we need to take history class to learn from history so we don't repeat history. It's like, I've been trying really hard the last couple of years to like connect with people that are much older and wiser than me, that have walked that journey of like building a successful organization. So I'm actually reading Lee Walker's book right now. It's called The Imagination House. And what's fascinating about this book is like Lee Walker, I'm halfway through the book, and Lee Walker has said like 80% of what helped Dell be really successful came as a result of all of the constraints that the business had. So when Michael Dell was building Dell Computers, he was putting part supplies in his dorm room and would hide them from his parents and like would assemble them somewhere else. And he had no way of like offering support or like service to customers, right? And so Lee Walker helped him partner up with a company called Tandem, which was a computer parts manufacturing company. And they it's like they out of all these constraints, there's so many limitations. I mean, this dude was building in a damn college dorm room. It's funny, I underlined this section of the book, and it says, in our case, constraint had bred imagination. And like, so anyways, long story short, they delegated so many like massive things in their business, like support and sales, manufacturing. They came up with this thing called just-in-time, a just-in-time ordering system, right? You go online and you get your computer built online. versus going in the store and buying it, which was like revolutionary in the 80s. But they did all this out of necessity because they didn't have any resources. So anyways, it's amazing when your back's up against the wall how resourceful you can get.
Yeah,
sorry, man. Long-winded answer.
That was a great answer. Is it right? And I think these people that like Lee Walker, like you've described, their legacy now is that they actually want to impact people who are serious, people who also want to have a massive impact. And yes, they're hard to get to, but they're not impossible to get to. You've proven that. And I think we all would be, wise to really identify who are our mentors and try and actually reach out to them. People like Mel Robbins and Grant Cardone, people who I thought were untouchable, I've had the privilege to interact with. And it's been interesting to see that especially with the social mediums today, it's amazing how many people actually don't try to reach out to these people, right? They're still human beings, and they still care when people interact with their stuff, and they still care when people reach out for help. Not to say that you're going to get an answer from everybody, but I think you're a great example to us, Christopher, that you can actually gain access if you try to some people that can massively impact your thinking in your world and allow you to do something potentially similar to what they've done. So anyway, I want to thank you for the great answer. Thank you again for coming on the show today. Again, for those that are watching, please look in the show notes, whether you're watching this on Facebook, on YouTube, or if you're listening to a podcast, go find it in one of those two locations, and we'll have a link to the $1 Million Real Estate Team, written by Christopher Waters himself. He'll give you the book for free, just pay for shipping. Be a great way to look at his many life lessons in building the great organization that continues to expand, and see how that impacts your life. So again, thank you again, Christopher, and thanks to all for tuning in and watching. And I'll leave with this final invitation and charge to all of us, which are 3 simple words, and they are: go think bigger. Thank you, Chris, for helping inspire us to want to do that today.
Thanks, Justin. Appreciate you, man.
You bet, man.